Good morning, and welcome to the March 2024 meeting of the California Commission on the State of Hate. My name is Russell Roybal. I'm chair of the commission, and I call this meeting of the Commission on the State of Hate to order at 9:01 a.m. On Wednesday, March the 20th. Closed captioning is available for this meeting. Closed captioning. You can access the closed captioning by clicking the button labeled Show Captions at the bottom of your screen. Let's now proceed to roll call. Deputy Director Watts, will you call the roll, please?
Sure. Chair Roybal.
Present.
Vice Chair Salcedo. Commissioner Che.
Present.
Commissioner Cuellar.
Present.
Commissioner Damsky.
Present.
Commissioner Filer.
Present.
Commissioner Levin.
Present.
Commissioner Sinar.
Present.
Commissioner Suthers.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Let's move on to review the agenda. You may view the agenda by visiting the Commission's website, which is at calcivilrights.ca.gov/Commission on the State of Hate. You can also find the Commission online by typing California Commission on the State of Hate in any search engine. When you get to the page, click on the button labeled Meetings and Agendas. We'll also put the link to the agenda in the chat. We are making 2 changes to the agenda today. We'll be moving agenda item 4, discussion regarding the Commission's annual report, up to the beginning of the meeting before agenda item 2, approval of the minutes. We'll also be skipping agenda item 3 today, which is the Civil Rights Department report. I'd also now like to move on to the process for public comment. First, this commission is a public body, and an important part of being a public body is hearing from the public. To that end, this meeting is open to the public, and there will be opportunities for public comments throughout the meeting today. To keep an orderly meeting, please make sure to comment only on the agenda item under consideration. If you have comments that are not specifically related to the agenda item, please save your comment for the agenda item titled Public Comment on Items Not on the Agenda. To submit a written public comment, you may email the Commission at csh@calcivilrights.ca.gov. We will also put that email in the chat. We'll be monitoring this channel throughout the meeting. If you submit a written public comment that pertains to an agenda item, we will read it aloud or summarize it when the public comment portion of the agenda item is open and before any vote. If the comment is not about a specific agenda item, we will read it aloud or summarize it at the end of the meeting during the agenda item titled Public Comment on Items Not on the Agenda. If you would like to speak at the meeting to deliver your public comment, you will have the opportunity to do so during the public comment portions of the meeting. You may request to speak on an agenda item by raising your hand on Zoom. If you are joining on a computer, you can raise your hand by pressing the raise hand button on the bottom of your screen. If you are on the phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. During the public comment portion, we will call on attendees who raise their hands to allow them to unmute and deliver comments. For anyone joining us in the room in Los Angeles today, you may submit a written comment by emailing us or by writing your comment on a piece of paper and handing it to Shanna Hart, our staff member in the room today. To deliver a verbal comment, please raise your hand and we will unmute the room. In the interest of time, we will limit verbal public comments to 3 minutes per person. So let's move on to our agenda item, discussion regarding the Commission's annual report. Commissioners, today we will start off this process by hearing from Deputy Director Watts about the report itself, and then the process we will use to submit edits and/or comments. Deputy Director Watts.
Thank you, Chair Roybal, and good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce the draft of our next annual report to you today. I'm going to start by giving you an overview of the process, and then I will give you kind of a high-level overview of some of the substance of the report, and then I'd love to just open this up to discussion to discuss your feedback. So first, just a little context setting. regarding our first report, if you may recall it, in the first report, we discussed our activities to date, such as electing the commissioners, setting up the operations. We were just getting our feet wet, things like that. We also introduced our strategic plan, and we emphasized that the strategic plan of the commission really rests on a foundation which consists of research and rigorous data, as well as community input and consultations with community-based organizations. We also identified 3 main strategic goals in that report. This included providing a comprehensive accounting of hate activity in California. Number 2 was developing recommendations for reducing hate crimes. Number 3 was developing recommendations for enhancing the resources and support for people in communities affected by hate. So we use those strategic goals to kind of inform the structure of the report for 23 to 24. So what is the process that the staff undertook for the draft that is before you now? So over the past year, the Commission and CRD staff have engaged in a number of fact-finding efforts with respect to each of the strategic goals, as many of you know. These fact-finding efforts included reviews of peer-reviewed research. Some of these reviews were led by external consultants, the Initiative to Study Hate, and CRD staff. We've also had quite a few consultations with subject matter experts and CBOs. We've also received information from experts at community forums, and we've received public comments throughout the year at this meeting, in community forums, and just in meetings as well. So the staff, including Rebecca Goodsell and Monica Chavez, synthesized these insights to develop interim policy recommendations. We also worked with CRD staff, Chair Roybal and Vice Chair Salcedo, to brainstorm the content of the report and to develop an outline. And then we wrote the draft, which you are viewing now. And in terms of the process moving forward, I'm sure many of you have questions about how we want to proceed. I'll just remind you of the process last year, which was that we presented a first draft to you in a public meeting. You provided high-level feedback. We worked with Vice Chair Salcedo and Chair Roybal to incorporate that feedback. And then in the second meeting, then we had another meeting where we presented our second draft, and then we sort of approved that and got approval from the governor's office. This year we could go through with the same process, or we could modify it a bit if you wanted to provide more detailed feedback. And I'll discuss that later, but I think we should have the substantive discussion first, and then we can determine what might be the best path forward. So I am going to share my screen to kind of walk through the report with you. Give me one moment. Okay, I assume you'll see this okay. If you can't see it, please let me know. So we organized this report, I think, as I mentioned, around each of our strategic goals. We started with Chapter 1, an introduction. Chapter 2 really addresses our strategic goal related to providing a comprehensive accounting of hate in California. And in this chapter, we discuss key patterns, trends, and data related to hate in California. We began by reintroducing the framework that we introduced in last year's report to think through the various data sets and information that exist on hate in California. Sorry, my phone's going off. We then sort of synthesized the findings from these data sets and other sources of information to provide an overview of hate in California and other patterns and trends, specifically related to hate against specific communities. We also have a discussion about communities for whom there is a dearth of data and for whom we don't know a lot about, given the lack of data. We also discussed the Commission's efforts to measure hate activity in California through our research project with the California Health Interview Survey. We discussed the research goals, the methods. We also make the case that we are introducing the specific survey questions that we are using in the CHIST, with the idea being that anybody could sort of take these questions, build off of them, and measure the state of hate in their own communities. We may revisit that in the second revision. I've been thinking about that a bit, and we might want to hold off until maybe we get the data back to make sure that we don't want to make any more revisions to the questions, but just to point that out. And then we proceed with interim recommendations for understanding the state of hate. These recommendations including establish ongoing funding for developing a comprehensive accounting of hate. The way we're sort of providing that accounting now is through funding for the commission, which, as you know, is temporary, at least at this point. We also make the case that CBOs collect a wealth of information and data, but that is not always shared with public entities for a variety of reasons. And we propose some ideas for increasing data sharing between public entities and CBOs. Given our focus over the past year on hate as it intersects with public institutions, we thought that warranted its own specific section. So we have a whole section where we discuss how political events may result in increases in hate, the impact of political speech on sort of tangible hate activities such as hate crimes. And we also discuss hate, threats, and harassment against public officials and in public meetings. And we wrap this section up by providing interim recommendations for addressing hate against public officials and in public meetings. These recommendations include enhancing training and resources for public officials and staff, enhancing security, which doesn't necessarily mean enhancing law enforcement presence, just enhancing security as public bodies see fit, exploring amendments to open meeting laws, investing in data and research on this topic, and engaging in efforts to shift norms. So that's chapter 1, addressing the comprehensive accounting, or excuse me, chapter 2. Chapter 3 addresses our second strategic goal, enhancing resources and support for those targeted by hate. We start this chapter off with a sort of review of research on the multifaceted impacts of hate, including lessons learned from our community forum in Sacramento in August. And the next section is a little bit different, and rather than only looking at research, we actually developed lessons learned from the shootings in Monterey Park and Half Moon Bay that occurred in early 2023 last year. If you might recall, some of CRD's staff and the Community Conflict Resolution Unit joined CBOs in responding to that shooting. And through those experiences, we observed a number of gaps in the government response. And we sort of highlight those gaps and develop recommendations around those to address those gaps, excuse me. We then move on to law enforcement. This primarily summarizes the activities of the subcommittee on recommendations for law enforcement. We discuss gaps in law enforcement data on hate. We also discuss gaps in law enforcement training. And then we provide an overview of the new training that is currently being developed by this commission in collaboration with Post. An important part of resources and support is the role of community-based organizations as well. So we do discuss some of the work that they're doing at a very high level. And then we provide interim recommendations for enhancing resources and support. These recommendations include implementing a statewide rapid response support team in the wake of things like mass casualty events, addressing gaps in law enforcement training requirements, implementing evidence-based law enforcement trainings, enhancing public education about reporting hate to law enforcement, providing ongoing investments to security grants, California versus Hate, and CBOs. And just in case you're not aware, California versus Hate also is funded by, is temporary at this point. And so we provide a recommendation to make that funding permanent. And then we end with future activities. Chapter 4 reviews our third and final strategic goal. This chapter primarily consists of research reviews. I just want to call, or just sort of acknowledge the work that the Initiative to Study Hate and Sarah Wilf specifically have done to review the research on this, and also Naya Hardaway, who's a PhD student at Stanford, who also reviewed the research on public messaging. But anyway, so this section is this chapter is divided into 2 sections. The first section relates to programs and interventions to prevent hate in schools. The second section is related to public messaging as a potential tool for prevention. Each of these sections ends with what we call guiding principles for implementing any of these interventions. We call these sort of guiding principles because there are significant gaps in the research, and we didn't feel comfortable sort of providing a one-size-fits-all solution or recommendation with respect to each of these topics. So essentially, we provide these principles as a way to guide decisions for policymakers or folks designing or implementing these interventions. So we provide guiding principles for programs and interventions to prevent hate in schools, and also guiding principles for designing and implementing public messages, whether that be public messaging campaigns or even just public statements. And then we provide interim recommendations, including investing in evidence-based school interventions and public messaging campaigns focused on preventing hate, supporting research and data collection on prevention initiatives, supporting collaborations between researchers, policymakers, and practitioners to sort of break down those silos between those groups. Incorporating prevention messages into public statements. So when a public statement is released, perhaps there could be specific framing that could prevent the spread of hate after something occurs. And preparing Californians before hate occurs is another recommendation. So to the extent that we can sort of predict when hate might occur, and in some cases we do see some correlations that can help us do that. Ensuring that we publicize resources to make sure that communities are prepared. Chapter 5 discusses activities of the commission, including meetings, community activities, and summarizes our research partnerships. And then Chapter 6 looks ahead by reviewing kind of our key activities that we expect to engage in over the next year with respect to each of our strategic goals, but also highlighting that special topic areas we hope to explore include continued exploration of hate against public officials and in public meetings, the role of the criminal legal system, and online hate.
Thank you, Deputy Director Watts. I like the last sentence in the outline for a hopeful future. Commissioner Filer has a question.
Unbelievable report. But I'm trying to see if under here there is a section addressing the increase of hate incidents on UC campuses. Is that where is
I don't
that?
believe we talk about UC campuses specifically. No. So to the extent that we have, or I don't know, Rebecca or Monica, do you remember if we talked about that? I just want to confirm.
We do not specifically talk about hate on UC campuses. We do discuss the increase in hate against religious communities, but not specifically on the UC campuses.
Okay. I say that because I know for our Jewish community, the increase of anti-Semitic incidents on UC campuses is pretty high. And in terms of looking at our overall state commission review of what's happening in our state, if that should be in there in some way.
Yeah, you're reminding me that we do have a section on schools, and this is, we do review some research showing the sort of rates of hate-based bullying at schools with respect to different groups. We could kind of build that out to the extent that we have data related to the incidents on UC campuses, I suppose. If we thought that UC campuses were important to sort of specifically call out, or we could keep this more general and focus on schools. It's really, yeah, it's up to the commission.
Commissioner Filer, I hear that you'd like staff to look into that a little bit more. And
Yeah,
see what data is available.
Yeah, I say that only because, UC Berkeley now Congress has put them on the list of schools that are going to be investigated because there was a student who was assaulted for being Jewish, and one that was strangled, one whose hand was broken. So, and currently, you know, the UC president of Santa Barbara, who is modern Orthodox Jewish, is being targeted for her religious practices and getting a lot of pressure. I don't know, it feels to me that it should be an area that should be included since they do fall under our statewide school responsibility.
Okay, that makes sense. We'll look into this more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Salcedo.
Yes, thank you so much. Greetings, beautiful people. I hope that you're having a beautiful and amazing day and that your light is shining bright as today for all of us. I wanted to, well, first, let me just say thank you so much, Deputy Director Watts and the team and everybody else who has worked in this draft. So thank you so much for all the labor that has been put into this. I wanna specifically go to chapter 4 and the title of it, in which, you know, talks about reducing hate. And I'm wondering if we could perhaps think about changing the reducing to eliminating, right? Because the hope is that hate is completely eliminated. And so if we can think perhaps, you know, instead of reducing, saying a path to eliminating hate. Something
Right.
like that. I think
Mhm.
it gives us the sort of like direction that we all collectively want to go to. But other than that, I once again want to appreciate my well, I want to appreciate all of your labor. And thank you so much for putting this comprehensive document together. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Salcedo. Commissioner Dansky, before we get to you, Commissioner Che, I know you have limited time today. Did you have any comments before you have to depart? I know you're departing in about 15 minutes.
Oh, thank you so much. I do have questions or comments with regard to the process in terms of review, which I can reserve, you know, right before I have to leave. So I'm fine to that
Okay.
others go ahead. Yeah,
All
thank
right,
you.
we'll come back to you. Commissioner Dansky.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Deputy Director Watts, for this really comprehensive overview. I was reflecting on how it's different from the report we had last year, which was delineated out more by all of the different subcommittee specific work. I like the way that here all of our work has been combined in a unifying format rather than looking at what each subcommittee meeting is doing in their individual meetings. I had a question about our process because I noticed I noticed an error in the document, as well as a suggestion for rephrasing one area. And I don't know if we're going to dive deep into those details today, or if that level of comment will be received at a different meeting. Can you comment, please?
It's a good question because it sort of depends on what we determine our next steps. I think it's fine to sort of maybe flag that real quick now, just in case.
Okay. So, and the version that I had didn't have this this table of contents in it, this outline. So the page numbers might be really different. In my version that you sent us yesterday, where it talks about what's happening in the Middle East, the phrasing used is conflict in the Middle East that began on October 7th, 2023. This is a ongoing conflict. It didn't begin on October 7th, 2023. So I'm wondering if there might be a more specific way of framing exactly what we're talking about that happened on that date. And my second is when we talk about the work that the Committee on Recommendations for Law Enforcement has been doing with POST, the acronym is peace officers, not police officers. And we have police officers in the document. I know I often confuse the two, but it should say peace officers rather than police officers. That concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank
Great,
you,
those are
Commissioner Dansky, for those important edits. Commissioner Sonar.
Thank you. So I had a couple of broader comments, and then in terms of more specific comments, I think I will hold off for now because there are a lot, and it may be that it's more helpful to share them in a document or in some other form. So I'll leave that to kind of our discussion of process. But overall, first, yeah, I wanted to just thank the Deputy Director Watts and the staff. This is an incredible report. It is clear from the, I've been able to go not through the entire report yet, but through about half of it. And it's excellent, it's careful, it's thorough, it's nuanced. It synthesizes not just a wide variety of academic research, but so much of what we have heard from as a commission over the course of this year, comments made by experts and by members of the public at community forums. So I really appreciate how all of that is integrated. It is both tapping into the best academic research we have, but also really conscious of reflecting the voices of community members that we have heard from and that our committees have engaged with. So I just wanted to first just note my appreciation for what is really a massive endeavor. So my couple kind of broader level comments. One is that I was thinking a bit about how it can be made more accessible to our, to the public. And it is a very rigorous document, right? It's, about 100 pages. And I think what's in there is important. And in many cases, the level of detail is also important, especially for policymakers or others who are thinking about how can we use this research to then guide our policy or, what we need to change, or how can we replicate this elsewhere? Any of that depends on, a certain level of comprehensiveness. But I also feel like the report should be accessible to at least our community-based partners. And so I was trying to think of ways that we could kind of pursue both objectives. And I think some of it has to do with even choices around presentation. So we're looking at an initial draft, but to the extent that we can have more graphic items, summaries, charts of some of the data, perhaps rather than pure narrative, if those are things that we can do, it might make just some of the content a little bit more accessible. And also, I think there may be sections that can actually be trimmed. I had some thoughts as I was reading, but there are parts where maybe it's not as important for those to understand perhaps like the full methodology behind a particular thing. And those are judgment calls, but I do feel like there's a little bit of a trade-off between the depth and accessibility. And kind of final related point to that, there are times where I feel like even the language used might be just slightly simplified without losing precision. So, there's in one section on the very beginning, when it goes through different data sources that are available, it occurred to me that I'm not sure that many people would understand what is meant by things like certain data sources are validated and verified. Like those are terms that have very specific meanings to researchers, but I think are not generally understood. Like, what's the difference between validation and verification? What does it mean? How do we understand it? So this is just one of multiple examples. And I understand that we want to be accurate. We don't want to lose precision, but it might just be that there are places where we can try to make it a little bit more accessible to the various audiences who will be reading it. So that was my first kind of higher level comment. The second is just as a matter of process and not so much for like reviewing the details of the report, but there are some, I think, important sections that come from work that the staff or particular committees have done, but that we haven't really engaged with as a full commission. And for that, I wonder if there just is an opportunity to do some short briefings on the content. So I was struck by that in the description of the rapid response team and lessons learned from the two mass shootings. And that seems incredibly important, but it seems like that expertise was generated by a lot of really extensive staff involvement with those issues. But I don't think we've really talked about it as much as a commission. And sorry, I just realized that I'm Commissioner Che's going to need to leave. I'll just wrap it up. There are a couple other places like that with some of the Chapter 4 research interventions, which might also be benefit from a briefing. I'm sorry, and I I cede my time to Commissioner Che and others who may need to leave.
Commissioner Sonar, we can come back to you after Commissioner Che if you have definitely more to say. I actually want to ask you a couple of questions about your comments. Commissioner Che. Thank you, Commissioner Sonar.
Well, thank you so much for accommodating my early transition. And actually, I'd like to build on Commissioner Sonar's comments, which goes to the process. And of course, I just want to thank the staff and Alec in particular for leading this research effort. You could see that it's building on the incredible work of the commissioners and the staff. I think that process-wise, I would like for our subcommittees to have an opportunity to review, in particular, the sections in which we believe we have contributed towards. But I wholeheartedly agree with Commissioner Sonar that there are aspects of the report that it would just be great to better understand. And I would leave it up to the staff and of course the whole commission on what form that would take. And the reason being is that this goes to my second part, which is the accessibility, I think, is really important insofar as we are supposed to, we know that the governor's office reviews this report. We also know that part of our mandate is to provide recommendations to state agencies. We'd like to think of the different ways in which we can either provide executive summaries, and some of these recommendations are live in the sense that, as Deputy Director Alec had mentioned, some of the recommendations and investments that the state has made is actually temporary. And so what happens once those investments go away? So the rollout, I think, is really important too. And I understand that the last rollout of the report was challenging because it took so much time to actually get it approved. But we're hoping that we would have a robust rollout strategy as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Che. I just, before you depart, Commissioner Che, I just, so everyone knows, Commissioner Suthers had to deal with something at the university, so Commissioner Suthers will return shortly. One of the things about Commissioner Sonar, Commissioner Che talked about is there a way to make some of the information a little bit more dynamic, like infographics or things that are easily digestible by the public, that then we could take out pieces of and promote through social media platforms or California versus Hate or other, or through our community-based organization partners, I think would be very helpful, because when you look at a 50 to 75 page report, it can become very overwhelming. So if there's a way to make it a little bit more easily digestible, that would be great. And then I just want to second, I was thinking the same thing, Commissioner Che, if there is a way for the subcommittees to comment on the specific parts that relate to their work, so that they don't necessarily have to digest the whole report, but really focus on the pieces that they have been working on and informing. So thank you for those thoughts, Commissioner Che. Commissioner Sonar, I wanted to come back to you to see if you had any more, since we had to, since you were so gracious to let Commissioner Che go before she had to take off. Are there any other comments from you, Commissioner Sonar? And then we'll go to Commissioner Levin.
Yeah, I definitely have additional comments. Some are kind of smaller points that I'm still not sure whether it would make sense to share here or in some other form. But I can mention, maybe I'll just take 3 kind of substantive points that I noticed in the first half of the report, which is what I've been able to go through so far. And I can, we can talk about whether it makes more sense to submit the others in another form. But a couple of things I noticed. One is in the section on data, there's a reference to, it seems like a soft recommendation for police departments to collect hate incident data. And, a sentence about encouraging members to report hate incidents to police is crucial for investigating and prosecuting hate crimes. And I was a little bit curious about that, and it's a soft recommendation. I think it's not really flagged as a separate recommendation, but, this idea that police should be gathering information pertaining to hate incidents as well as hate crimes. And I think that's an interesting question about whether we want them to do that. It certainly seems that, as a society and, as a government, we should be collecting information on hate incidents, which are often, quite serious and affect members of our communities in all kinds of ways that are not captured by hate crimes. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we would want police departments specifically to be collecting that data. And if we do want them to collect that data, I think we need to think through, like, what do we want them to do with that? And so, for example, if somebody experiences, microaggressions at work or bullying at school, like, are we recommending that they contact police departments to provide that information? And what do we think that the police should do with it? And, given that there are a lot of concerns around kind of over criminalization, I think we need to think a little bit more about, whether we want hate incident data to be like a new project of police departments or some other group like California versus Hate. So that was just an example of something in the data section, which is a small point, but I also feel like we shouldn't be making that recommendation without really thinking it through. So that was the first point. Another point, so there's, I think, a really important section in the report on bias, incidents, and concerns arising out of October, the events of October 7th and the aftermath. And the main point I had on that was just a question of, currently it's framed as about being anti-religious hate. That's kind of the only context or section or framing in which we talk about what's happening. And, I often hear from people who are Arab or Palestinian who have been very much affected by hate in the last few months, that they're not all Muslim, and what's happening to them is not all Islamophobia. So I think that kind of just reducing it to anti-religious hate and not discussing it in somewhat broader terms might be seen as kind of erasing the particular identities of people who are affected. So it's not that anti-Muslim hate, for instance, or anti-Jewish hate, should not be emphasized, but that may not, I don't know that it's appropriate as the sole frame for thinking about post-October 7th issues. And, I'm just thinking of just yesterday, there's news about a lawsuit against a man who assaulted 3 individuals in Monterey County a few months ago. They were including a 13-year-old, and these individuals were using sticks to write in the sand, "Free Gaza," and were physically assaulted and subject to slurs and all kinds of things. Now, I don't know if that's anti-Muslim hate. I'm not even sure that they were Muslim. So, the point is that to capture what is happening in these forms of hate without erasing identities, including the more than 20% of Palestinians who are not Muslim and who are Christian, I think it's just important to think about the framing there. So that was just another thing that occurred to me. A third point, and then I'll leave my comments for now, is I think we need to be consistent with when we're describing hate incidents as examples. We need to be careful around using words like alleged and reported. And it's not to say that we should represent every incident that's been reported as having occurred. So I think qualifiers are fine, but maybe just we need to be consistent about how we describe things. There's one incident that's mentioned in the report, but it's, I think, the one time I saw it referred to as an alleged hate-related incident, and that seems to flag it as something that we do not believe. And I think the word allegedly in particular feels a little like that, whereas a reported incident is different. That feels somewhat more at least neutral. So I think just consistency in how we're describing incidents, to not be making judgments on like our own belief or, you know, the credibility of individuals who reported incidents. And then actually I have one more tiny process thing. Page numbers would be helpful so that when we provide like our fuller set of comments, we can easily tell you what paragraph and page we're looking at.
Thank you, Commissioner Sinar. Commissioner Levin, did you still have a comment?
Yes, I do. Let me just, okay, yeah. Sorry, we had a death in the family and my computer's not working. So it's one of those days, but first thing that's really important. California deserves a rigorous, well-researched report, and that was among the primary things we wanted this commission to undertake. With respect to Deputy Director Watts, I don't know what the law allows, but I think every commissioner owes him a dinner with dessert. What a wonderful effort. He basically is writing a treatise in real time. In academia, that doesn't happen. So I want to applaud the efforts of he and the Civil Rights Department. I do have some specific things that relate across a couple of categories, if I may. The first is process. I got this the day I lost a relative and had to, you know, I'm like literally like, you know, having to make flight arrangements and stuff now. So I really think that we have to have the commission be viewed a little differently on a more broad scale. And what I mean is, I want us to have some autonomy. And part of that autonomy involves transparency, being able to review stuff, being able to write our own rules with regard to how we conduct ourselves. By the way, that being said, I couldn't be more thrilled that we got placed, you know, like Dorothy's house got placed in the Civil Rights Department. We had no idea where it was going to land. And as someone whose career started with the mentorship of General Counsel Ann Noel, thank you for having us. We're kind of like the relatives that are in the living room. But nevertheless, I do think process-wise, we have to have a meaningful participation in it in a way that's a little different than what we have now, which is more of a consent rather than advise. So that being said, I feel like I got delivered Sergeant Pepper's. You know, in other words, I might want to tinker with something. One thing that really I have to put out with regard to substantive, we left out the homeless. No. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I wanted to make sure that Commissioner Che went ahead of me, although I had trepidation because I did want to congratulate her on the 4th anniversary. 4 fingers, thank you, Brian. 4th anniversary of Stop AAPI Hate. We worked together so hard to get COVID-19 information because they didn't have data from before, and we showed this big spike, and then they showed even bigger ones for and things from victims. So what I think is very helpful about having this combination of commissioners, one that services communities, one that's a bit of an academic nerd and still does grassroots, it'll make the report stronger. But I do think there are a couple of things that we might want to review, and that is, I concur with basically everything all the other commissioners said. I would like greater review. I'm not so keen on having every outside group, like, you know, sculpt this. The commission is supposed to represent folks, and outside groups, I love them very much, but I do think there's something about some degree of independence. Not saying so there's an addition. Again, I want input, but I don't want veto power from outside folks. That's one of the reasons why we wanted to put together the subcommittees. But we don't have time to go into that now. I like that we covered mass casualty. I think that's really important. What I am concerned about, though, is we covered it to the exclusion of, for instance, these horrible, violent attacks on the LGBTQ community here in the state. and things that are going on with regard to civil liberties on college campuses and elsewhere, as well as microaggressions. And what I'm saying is that this balance, and I applaud Commissioner Sinar. It is also something, and my dear friend Hussein Ibish writes so eloquently about this, about the conflation of faith with ethnicity, with religion, which is something, for instance, that Hitler did. The conflation of Jews, not only as a faith, but as a parasitic race and ethnicity. And we are seeing, interestingly enough, in the limited data where we get, for instance, in LA, big increases, for instance, in anti-Arab, and problem is information deserts. But I do want to applaud the commission, Deputy Director Watts, for using an array of information and stating the limitations on them. Again, I think it would be useful, though, to have something about, in addition, we have mass casual events and failures, also fails or not failures, stressors with regard to local governance, right? Everything from local municipal meetings, etc., and something about the kinds of venting that goes out around hot button events, whether it's what's going on in the Middle East or the LGBTQ community. Also, just to reiterate what one other quick thing, subsidy. Schools, they should be doing climate surveys, or at least we should discuss the utility of that. In other words, it's not like an on-high thing from the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism or Sacramento or whoever. These schools can individually find out about tensions each year by looking at a couple of things. One, local demographic data, which they have from doing surveys of who's their students. The other thing is climate surveys that are anonymized what students are experiencing, because a Jewish or Muslim or transgender student may not feel they want to put a return address on something that, on something. So local schools can do a lot with that. Last point, I really love the one thing I knew was going to happen, having worked at Southern Poverty Law Center, where the graphics are king, if we could take just certain graphics showing, and by the way, I'm not saying we should do these, some graphics, this is an example of what I would use. This is a commission, I'm one of 9, and we have a civil rights department, they're pretty smart folks, but something would show look, here's just overall hate crimes in California. Here's overall sexual orientation hate crimes. Here's overall gender identity over the last several years, and something that value adds to the wonderful stuff that the AG's office does. And then maybe even something about what is the most current data we have from LA, San Francisco, maybe not, maybe there's not enough space, but at least something that shows general trends. It's eye-catching up front, kind of an executive summary with maybe 4 charts. I can tell you that in my experience, when we deal with outside groups or the Wall Street Journal, they're like, give us your 4 best charts or your 5 best charts. But I love the report. I would like more notice, and I also think the commissioners, each one of us, should be able to have earlier access. That being said, it's very easy for someone who can't play a musical instrument telling the Sgt. Pepper folks that they should have more horns. So that being said, can I tell you something from the bottom of my heart? I am so in admiration of all of you. And when we get to these meetings, they know I bore them to death, and I say, the people who experience these things need us, right, who've gone through this. And I really want to put my hats off to the Civil Rights Department folks, our chair and vice chair. We don't have enough time, but in other words, this is like a 100-page treatise, okay, folks? So yeah, we can say it needs another cover, and we need to, but the substance. You go to places like Florida where they're having a measles outbreak based on incompetence, and you can't even get academics to go teach in places. We have the best minds and the biggest hearts working on this. And I don't have enough time to thank each of you by name, but you know who you are. Thank you so much, CRD and all my fellow commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Levin. I just want to emphasize 2 things Commissioner Levin said. One is, I think that, as I said before, the data visualizations, I think, are very important, and will go a long way to talking about the work of the commission. And then the other thing I would just say is that in response to Commissioner Levin is, I think we are trying to figure out how now that the reports are becoming much more substantive, how the commissioners provide feedback in a way that doesn't violate Bagley Keene. Is Alec and I have kind of gone around and around about how to do that. That doesn't necessarily always have to have the edits happening in a public meeting, because that sometimes is just not gonna, it's gonna delay the report in ways that I think none of us want, but we also want to make sure that there is transparency around the report. So that is something staff is thinking about, something that we are continuing to talk about. So I just want to, Commissioner Levin, tell you that it is something that we need to figure out as we continue to move forward in the future. And, you know, we'll try things, and if they don't work, we'll try something else. So, but thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's an important part of, as we continue to do this, and as the reports continue to happen year after year, what are the most ideal ways to be able to produce them in a way that's efficient and transparent. So thanks you for raising that. Commissioner Damsky.
Thank you, Chair. First, I want to express my condolences to Commissioner Levin for the death in your family. I know that you've had an ill family member for a long time, so my heart is with you, and I'm sure all commissioners here would say the same. Second is, I really want to appreciate Commissioner Sonar for her comments about the discussion of what's happening since October 7th to all of the impacted communities, and perhaps suggest that maybe one way to flesh out that section in a way that's sensitive could be to reach out to some of our community organization partners for language and framing, so that you know, as I was reading that section, I felt very clearly like we were trying to avoid landmines in the way we talk about this. And so it felt like a casual reference to something that's actually being very impactful to a number of communities here in California and across our country right now. So so again, I want to thank Commissioner Sonar for the depth of insight that you offered in how we think about this and talk about it, and encourage our report to work towards a more full, fair, and unsensitive way of talking about this with some detail, but not so much that it overwhelms the whole report. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Damsky, and thank you for recognizing Commissioner Levin's loss. Commissioner Levin, may your family member's memory always be a blessing. Are there any other comments about the report? Or Alec, do you want to, now that you've had some of that information, do you want to talk more about process?
Yeah.
Given some of the things that the commissioners have given around feedback around it?
Thank you for the opportunity. First, just a reminder, this is, the report was definitely a team effort. So thank you so much, Rebecca Goodsell and Monica Chavez, who put in a lot of work in this report. So thank you. And of course, thank you, commissioners, too, for all the work you've done. And our research partners as well. I do have a couple follow-up questions on the feedback, but I'll hold off on that until we align on the process. I'm thinking, based on the feedback that I've received today, there's two ways of going about this, and I think I'm leaning towards one specific option. You know, the first option that I mentioned before is what we did last year, where staff put together a document, we discuss it at a high level, we incorporate your feedback, you review the second draft. If that's okay, we'll go to approvals. Otherwise, you know, we just keep on reviewing it in meetings. Given the length of this report and given how much content is in there and how complex all these issues are that we're discussing in the report, I think it might be good to have a second option, which would be if commissioners want to send us sort of detailed feedback, whether that's written. Ideally, it would be written. And so the idea is that you could take the document, comment on it, just like you would any other document. I can collect those and then I can send them out to other commissioners in conjunction with a public meeting. And we have a public meeting where we sort of make that feedback public, and then staff can incorporate it. And that way we can make sure we navigate Bagley Keene, and the public, is aware of this feedback, and also gives staff the chance to get this detailed feedback, because things like, I really appreciate the comments on language, and I think Commissioner Damsky, I really appreciate, I think your last comment about, we were trying to avoid landmines. That's exactly what we were trying to do, right? But in doing that, it came off as a little too casual, right? And so those specific comments are so helpful for us, and I think it would be nice to have more things like that when commissioners have a chance to look at this in more depth.
Alex, can I ask you a question around the suggestion that Commissioner Che made? I don't know what the ramifications would be around Bagley Keene, but is there a way to take, in particular, the recommendations sections and split them up among the subcommittees that have kind of jurisdiction over them? So policy recommendations to the Policy Recommendations Committee, data recommendations to the Subcommittee on Data, law enforcement recommendations to the Subcommittee on Law Enforcement. Is there a way to do that in subcommittee meetings to review those particular sections, to then give you feedback that then you could do what you just said, then send it out to the full commission in conjunction with a public meeting, as a way to make sure we're not violating Bagley Keene, but that you're getting a little bit more substantive feedback on the recommendations in particular that those committees have purview over? Is that possible?
Sure, we could do that. If we limited it to recommendations, we could do that.
Just by like a show of like thumbs up or hands up, this is not an official vote, but do folks feel like that is a good process or a good way to get at some of these pieces? Or
I just interject a question, just to clarify. So everyone would look at the suggestions, but smaller substantive discrete topics would be doled out by subcommittee? Like, so it's bifurcated? In other words, first part, we all get to look at the suggestions, and then the second part is only done by committee. And if I'm wrong, please let me know.
What I was suggesting, Commissioner Levin, is that people can submit, as Alec has, Deputy Director Watts has said, can submit their comments in writing that then the staff can aggregate. What I was suggesting in addition to that was that, in particular, the recommendations that are included in the report, that the ones that are germane to each subcommittee be reviewed by that subcommittee in a little bit more detail, so that commissioners have an opportunity to be able to provide that feedback. So for instance, the recommendations that are around data or research, you and Commissioner Sinar on your subcommittee would review those in pretty good depth and give recommendations back. That does not stop you from providing recommendations in other areas, but in order to help the staff get some more substantive feedback on those particular areas, to split it up that way. That's what I was suggesting. And Deputy Director Watts, do you think that is doable?
I think we could do that with the recommendations. I still like the kind of option that if commissioners want to sit down and go through each line by line and provide comments, and then I collect that, compile it, send it out in conjunction with the public meeting. I think I would honestly really appreciate that, because you all are here because of your expertise, and there's a lot that I don't know and that staff don't know, and we do have some blind spots, and so we'd love any feedback that you can provide, even if it just comes to framing.
The other thing that I would say around that, Commissioner Filer, I'll come to you as soon as I'm done. Last year we did it, Vice Chair Salcedo and I did work with the staff, both to help draft the original report and then take commissioner comments and do that. I actually don't feel comfortable doing that with this round because the substance of the report exceeds my expertise. I am not a researcher. I am not an academic, and I think I'm not a data person, and so I would not feel comfortable doing what we did last year in regards to that, because I think it's more important that those of you who work in those fields and have much far expertise than I do. I won't speak for my colleague Vice Chair Salcedo, but I think that a way to make sure that we can access and tap into your expertise and brilliance would be ideal. Commissioner Filer.
Yeah, I was just thinking, because I had brought up about with the UCs, is that possible that under research and data, we could include something around the UCs in looking at that data that we have collected and put that into the report? And secondly, I think that probably all of us that have some sensitivity to how the language should be used in describing the events recently of the Middle East, maybe we all need to look at that, just to make sure that in representing our variety of organizations, we're making sure and ensuring that the way that's presented is falls in line with all of our organizations.
Thank you, Commissioner Filer. Commissioner Levin, then we'll go back to Deputy Director Watts, and then if there are no other comments, we'll go to public comment. Commissioner Levin.
First of all, I just have to, we couldn't have anyone more wonderful than you. So that's it. That being said, there are bigger nerds in the world. And we're trying to get them to work on advisory boards, believe me. Anyway, when this was being put together, we wanted the wonderful team of folks that we have. And, sometimes, you get that magic ensemble, and thank you, we have it. So first of all, thank you, Chair, and gives me another excuse to take you to dinner. In any event, yeah, one of the things with respect to a couple things. First of all, I'm happy to have community group input. I worked at a wonderful nonprofit, Southern Poverty Law Center, but they also have their own sphere. And I don't answer to community groups. I answer to every resident of the state of California, even those that don't have big community groups, like homeless folks or undocumented people who don't have, so believe me, I don't want to get in trouble here because I love and live for and represented community groups for 4 decades. And I do want their input, but I don't want veto power. In the emergence of the commission, we made sure as much as we could that those voices would be heard, and we want to make sure on the advisory subcommittees that will take place as well. I do think we're talking differences of degree rather than definition, because nobody on this commission is going to turn their backs on vulnerable people. I know it in my heart, something my mom gave me. A very sensitive heart who knows people. And each one of these commissioners, I promise to you, I promise every one of you, and that includes, and I want to talk to students because there was just a Senate hearing on religious hate crime and incidents relating to Jewish folks. Senator Stern and Weiner, I don't know, am I allowed to take them to dinner up to 1999 or something? In any event, the sensitivity, but also these fora, and I want to thank our commissioners who work on these fora. Some that certain commissioners couldn't go to because things were very very busy at that time. But when you speak to these kids and their parents who've come here from all over the world for religious freedom, beautiful Muslim children beautiful children from around the Middle East and Asia, Jewish students who are hurting. There's enough Soros in the world. What we need to bring is a modeling, just like in other states where they model by calling immigrants horrible names. We're going to model that the vulnerable people and not so vulnerable people, but when things get hot, that we will be on top of this. So one of the things that might be beneficial is even just some data on what's happened. We're not going to get the collegiate-wide data that folks want in such short order. Trust me, I'm still waiting for certain major cities in California that were supposed to give me stuff before. But I do think that to the extent that community folks say, hey, the way this is framed is hurtful to us, or there's information out there that you don't have, we earnestly want you to have it. We do have an obligation not only to listen and to perform. So I hope I was able to juggle that plate spin on the Sullivan Show, but independent, timely data, particularly when communities are undergoing stresses, and what we're seeing for the Muslim community, highest since at least 2016. Jewish community, record, city after city, and it's driving increases in cities across our state, from San Diego to San Francisco to Los Angeles, where we do have data, but not at the collegiate level. But what I can tell you is these students, when we were there the other evening with the state senators, and I asked, have you seen incidents of crimes at, now this is K to 12, at your school? All 5 or 6 students raised their hands that there were actually religious-based hate crimes at their schools this term. So we are seeing a generational type of grief going on for Jewish Americans and Americans who have a connection to Israel, as well as our Muslim brothers and sisters, our Arab brothers and sisters, our South Asian MENA, all these people. I do think, if I may, that we must reach out to them. So I'm not opposed to outreach. I am opposed to veto power. But I think we must strongly, with a rebuttable presumption in favor of not only listening, but incorporating suggestions that will lessen the grief that is out there. This document is going to be looked at not only by researchers, but by members of communities. And one of the reasons, Chair Roybal, where I think your leadership has been so wonderful, I go to city after city, and the folks who know you, when I mention you, smile and mention something kind that you've done for folks. And we have to model this with not only this wonderful commission that has substance, but also outreach to communities that we will get to based on our structure, our efforts, and our subcommittees. But I do want to caution that I don't think that we should have veto power necessarily by a myriad of outside groups. There are so many of them with different perspectives and different experiences. Anyway, Chair, love you, and thank you for the way that this is really important. You could have a commission that has great data and that has great bureaucracy and doesn't reach the heart of people and doesn't reflect the beautiful admirable diversity of our state, where we are getting refugees for women's health care, getting refugees from asylum seekers, and getting refugees from states that turn their backs on young LGBTQ transgender people. And especially when we have a loss, Nick Benedict in Oklahoma, when we see the power of the state being used to highlight and promote bigots, we are going to offer people of goodwill across the nation a template for not only responding substantively with research, but responding to communities. And Chair Roybal, bless you, we couldn't have had a better role model for our state of California. I wanted to make sure I said that before I went out of town. God bless you, Chair Roybal.
Thank you, Commissioner Levin. I appreciate it very much.
You're a mensch.
We'll take 2 more comments and then we'll go to public comment. Vice Chair Salcedo.
Thank you so much, Chair Roybal. I just want to take a moment for us to be reminded that the work that we do, right, in our day-to-day jobs, but also in this body, right, it's not easy. It's very taxing in our minds and our bodies and oftentimes in our spirits. And I want for us to just take a moment to really understand, right? And I want to personally express my appreciation to each and every one of you for who you are and for the light that you bring to this body and for the amazing work that we are collectively doing. So I just want to take a moment really for us to grasp the severity of this work, but also to appreciate ourselves as we continue to do this work, because that is important. So I want to once again express my appreciation to each and every one of you, and thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Salcedo, very much. Commissioner Sinar, and then we'll go to public comment.
Yeah, thank you. So I was just trying to think through the process questions about how do we get this report to completion in the relatively short time period that we have. And so just commenting on a couple of suggestions that have been made, definitely agree that those who wish to should provide written feedback on any sections of the report that are important to them. I agree that that may include for some of us the particular sections addressing developments in the Middle East and their effect in California. I think a lot of us are concerned about sections on law enforcement, how those are presented. So whatever it is, I think we should provide the written feedback with the understanding that that may become public, and it's just something to know with our work. So that makes a lot of sense, and maybe we can set a target time frame. So whether that's a week from now or 2 weeks from now, I'm not sure, Commissioner Watts, what you think would be appropriate, but I think all of us probably work better if we have deadlines on our calendar. So that's one piece of it. I like the idea of subcommittee discussions on relevant sections, if that's permitted by Bagley-Keene. And so as long as we're able to do that, it seems to make sense that we do that, particularly if there's subcommittee meetings that are scheduled over the next couple of weeks for all the subcommittees. And then I do think we need to have another full commission meeting before the meeting in which we approve the report, because it seems like there's just still a lot of substance that if we discuss in our subcommittees or read through individually and have further comments on, then there's got to be some opportunity to kind of flesh some of that out, and including what we were talking about earlier is maybe having kind of oral briefings during very short briefings on some of the sections that we haven't really kind of collectively discussed as a commission, including some of the things that particular subcommittees have worked on, but that are not really sort of known or have been discussed by the committee as a whole. So that's, I'm not sure if that's helpful at all, but in terms of it feels like there's 3 things. Like, provide written comment if you have the inclination to do so, subcommittee discussions if we are legally permitted to do that, and then third, an intermediate commission meeting before final approval to flush it out. And so I'm wondering, before we turn to public comment, do we want to sort of agree on a structure or schedule of how we're going to do that? Or do we want to invite public comment first and then come back to that? But I just want to make sure we have that discussion.
So Commissioner Sinar, to follow up on what you just talked about, Deputy Director Watts and I have talked about the possibility of scheduling an additional meeting to get at what you're talking about, that we should have one more meeting to be able to review that. I think we were waiting to hear from the commissioners but it sounds like that is something that we need to do given the density of the report and all the feedback today, and that we're not necessarily rushing the process or limiting the ability to be able to make those comments. So I certainly think that I think the three things that you have raised are all doable. We'll need to look into the subcommittee stuff just to make sure that we're doing things according to the law. So the staff, Deputy Director Watts said, can you look into that piece? And then we will look into scheduling an additional meeting. So be on the lookout for that as we try to manage folks' calendars and figure out what's the best timing. I think the staff will have a better idea after this meeting what all of that will look like and where we'll need to place the meeting. I don't think that meeting will be in April, Deputy Director Watts. I think that additional meeting will likely be in early May, given the timeline, unless you...
Yeah, we could proceed with perhaps a timeline where commissioners provide feedback. We could say something like in 2 weeks or so to me. I can get a chance to kind of compile that. While I'm waiting for that, I can start addressing or thinking through the feedback you provided in this meeting today. And then we can, we have a meeting scheduled at the end of April, and I'll send out sort of a revised draft along with some of your feedback. I'll have to think about it. Maybe it makes sense to just provide specific sections that are changed. And then, yes, maybe we can start thinking about a meeting shortly after our April meeting as well, if we need it.
Okay, how does that, our commissioners okay with that as we kind of navigate this? And we'll be in touch with some of that information. Bambi and I meet with Commissioner Salcedo, and I meet with the staff once a month. I meet with the staff separately at another time, so we'll make sure that this continues to move, that the commissioners are that we'll get out to you the timeline as quickly as possible and be able to get that on the calendar before your dates fill up. Commissioner Levin, do you have an additional comment before I move to public comment?
Yeah, I think the commission, based on our own request, right? It was our request that there be more transparency, that we get a greater opportunity to review. Even if folks, there's some possible scheduling thing, I understand. Most folks here, I think, try to make everything. I really do think that if I, on the one hand, a few minutes ago said, hey, we need more transparency, we then have to offer deference to the Civil Rights Department, who's made truly Herculean efforts to put this together. In other words, to the extent that we can even get a quorum, and to the extent that a commissioner may not be available, it sounds to me like their feedback is going to be considered. So I would encourage, if we all could, and I understand, I know you're doing this on your own time, I understand that, but in this case, honestly, if there was one civil servant in government that has been working the hardest, I think, in the country right now, I think it's Alec and the crew at CRD right now. So if we could try and be flexible and offer them deference with respect to them trying to help us get these views represented and this kind of review, I would please wholeheartedly encourage us to hold this intra-meeting event. We discussed this in our subcommittee meetings. And again, if you're going to thank someone, you also want to help them with the load. It is truly an incredible load that they did. And there's so much substance there where even a slight tweaking might make it slightly better. I would encourage you, and I know it's a pain in the neck to folks who already have full schedules, but if we could please do that, I'd greatly encourage it and be appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Levin. And Commissioner Sinar, I just wanted to go back to that what we just talked about, that responds to your comments. Great. All right, we do have some public comment, so let's move to public comment. Monica, can you please tell us who is in the queue for public comment?
Yeah, it looks like Sean Gilbert has requested to speak. I have just muted
Hi,
him.
Sean. Welcome. You have 3 minutes. Great to see your name and hear your voice again.
Thank you so much, Chair Roybal, and all the commissioners for all the work you're doing. I truly appreciate it. And I want to say my condolences to you, Commissioner Levin, for your loss in your family. Thank you so much, Deputy Director Watts. You and your colleagues have put together a draft of the upcoming report that is, to me, amazing. I do want to mention, I'm going to first speak as a citizen of California. I live in Antioch, as you may remember, and then as a League of Women Voters Diablo Valley member. So first as an individual person and a retired teacher, I'm thankful for the program and interventions section that you've included in the draft report to come. And I'm wondering, well, first of all, as a teacher, the notion of training staff and how they work with young people in the K-12. When I was a beginning high school teacher, I remember going through a program that was provided by the Southern Poverty Law Center. And this issue takes place within each of us, recognizing our own implicit biases. And the Southern Poverty Law Center did an in-service for staff, and it was very insightful about ourselves, because that's where all of this is. It's all within ourselves and how we behave towards fellow human beings. So that is one thing. So I consider that as a great outreach resource, and I know Commissioner Levin has mentioned them more than once today, which I was very happy to hear. Another group that did some in-service, and I also taught this course, is Facing History and Ourselves, because that's just a dynamic program that really explores how we behave towards one another and the horrible, tragic results of that. So those are my comments as far as an individual person. As a league person, we are concerned about the civil engagement of people towards one another and the rise of incivility in public meetings, city councils, school boards. We did do, just as you were rolling out this program last spring, Becky Monroe was a panelist on a league program in trying to educate the community about the Commission on Hate and the status of hate in our state. So what more can we do? Because we are concerned, we are out doing presentations on mis and dis. We have a member who's involved with civil engagement and talking with our Board of Supervisors and other bodies, elected offices, whether it's city council or school boards. We're willing to be observers to help them establish upfront processes, although I'm not trying to be like we know it all or we do it all, but just to help reaffirm civil engagement within these bodies that the public engages with. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sean, for your public comment. Monica, are there any other public comments?
No other public comment.
All right, thank you. Thank you to the public. Just one last round to the commissioners. Any further comments before we move on to the next agenda item?
I just have a couple other comments, sorry.
Sure, please, Deputy Director Watts.
Thanks for the kind of a minute to kind of think about things. With regard to accessibility and kind of think making the report visually more appealing, I think we're definitely on the same page there. The way we've kind of proceeded so far is just making sure we have everything on the page and making sure that we have the substance there. And then we kind of view the report as almost a jumping off point to create more accessible artifacts, I suppose. Like some sections of these reports could be one pagers that we work with a marketing company to produce or briefs for schools or administrators. So I do want to just kind of point that out. And we have sort of plans to add pictures and infographics and data visualizations. We haven't prioritized that just yet. So thank you for their feedback on that, and we will do our best to incorporate that. But we are going to focus on the sort of substantive content first, just to let you know. The other thing that I think Commissioner Sanar mentioned is the idea of briefings. I'm trying to mull over how to do that in a very efficient way, given that there is a lot of substance there. But I think maybe I'll just take some time to think about if there's a way to do that and outside of the report, and perhaps you can just talk about it in the April meeting. I'll talk to Chair Roybal too about options. But did you have any kind of other additional thoughts about that, Commissioner Sanar, in terms of the exact format? Are you thinking setting up public meetings to address kind of each of the sections that we want to be briefed on, or?
I mean, nothing so complicated, I think. It just like maybe we could come up with like 5 sections of, 3 to 5 sections of the report that people feel that we have discussed least as overall commission. Like for me, that might include the Monterey Park and the other mass shooting section, and perhaps a chapter 4 material, because that's entirely from research reviews that we've not talked about. So maybe those 2, and I don't know, we could come up with a 3rd or something if there is something else that strikes people in that way. And just devote like 5 minutes each to sort of an oral summary of what some of those sections are, and providing an opportunity for questions or comment from commissioners who were less involved with generating that material. And so it was something, I'm thinking of something fairly simple that could be integrated into a meeting, but that
Great.
might help everyone be on the same page.
Fantastic. That sounds good. I think, one thing I was going to suggest is when you all provide written comments, if you could maybe just comment on the portions that you want to have a conversation about. I think that would be helpful too. And then we can just make sure to prioritize those for sort of briefings. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Deputy Director Watts. We have one more comment from Commissioner Damsky, then we will take a short break before continuing with our agenda. Commissioner Damsky.
Thank you. The short break was what I was going to ask about.
Ah,
So thank you for
well,
that. Good timing.
Great minds think alike, Commissioner Damsky. So it's 10:28. We will take a 10-minute break and come back at 10. Well, let's say 7-minute break, come back at 10:35 to complete our meeting. Thanks, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. Just to note for the minutes as we reconvene, I believe Commissioner Southers is still dealing with the issue on campus. So just a note for that, which is why Commissioner Southers' camera is off. Let's move on to which section on the agenda. It's actually item 2, but we moved some things around in the agenda. Approval of the minutes. So we'll now move on to approval of the minutes from our last commission meeting. The minutes from the last meeting are attachment A. We'll post a link in the chat to attachment A with the minutes. Is there any discussion from the commission on the minutes or any edits? Seeing none. Oh, Commissioner Damsky, did you have an edit?
Yeah, you caught me before I even raised my hand.
Well, I saw
I
you.
just
I saw you come off mute. So
I just wanted to express my appreciation for the thoroughness of the minutes, and if there are no amendments that other commissioners would suggest, then I will move we approve the minutes as they are.
thank you for that motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Filer. Before we move to further discussion from the commissioners, Monica, is there any public comment for the minutes?
No public comment.
Seeing no public comment, we'll move on to discussion from the commissioners. Any further discussion from the commissioners on the minutes of our last meeting?
I would just like to say thank you for the minutes. They are very detailed. I was unfortunately not able to be there, but I was able to read the minutes and understand everything that was happening there. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Cuellar, and a special thanks to Monica Chavez from the Civil Rights Department for creating those minutes and keeping an accurate and thorough record of our meetings. Thank you, Monica. Let's go ahead and move to a vote. We'll call the roll for approval of the minutes.
Chair Roybal,
Aye.
Vice Chair Salcedo. She's not back yet. Commissioner Che is not here. Commissioner Cuellar,
Aye.
Commissioner Damsky,
Aye.
Commissioner Filer,
Aye.
Commissioner Levin,
Aye.
Commissioner Sinar,
Aye.
Commissioner Southers is also not here.
Monica, just note that Commissioners Salcedo and Southers were not present for this
Will do.
part of for the minutes. Let's move on to chair and subcommittee updates and discussion. I just would like to start my update by wishing everyone a very happy Women's History Month, and also thank and congratulate Vice Chair Salcedo for receiving the Reach LA's Pillar of Excellence Award. Felicidades, Vice Chair Salcedo. I feel like every month I talk about a new award that you received. Pretty soon I'm going to say, we want to congratulate Vice Chair Salcedo on her Oscar.
Well, a partner from the governor will be cute.
You're like an EGOT winner, Vice Chair Salcedo. So congratulations on your well-deserved recognition. I also just want to take a moment to thank the staff again for their work on the report. As all of you have seen, it is very substantive and lots of hours were taken to do that. So thank you very much again to Monica, to Rebecca, to Deputy Director Watts for really this amazing piece of work that we're going to continue to work on over the next couple of months. And it is just, I think, what we were hoping for, and I think that I can't wait to dig into it further as we continue to do our work on behalf of the people of California. So thank you to the staff very much for your work on all of this. I also just want to remind folks around California versus Hate. Tomorrow I will be attending, actually this evening I'll be attending a community reception for the Racial Equity Commission, a fellow commission and public body here in the state of California. That's going to be in Lamont, California, which is just outside Bakersfield. And then tomorrow I will be attending the Racial Equity Commission's meeting, which is happening in Delano in the Central Valley. And very excited to be, and very honored to be invited by the commission to represent our commission, to talk about our work, in particular, our work around achieving equity in data and research collection around the impacts of hate on Black, Indigenous, and all people of color, and the work that we're doing to complement the work that the Racial Equity Commission is doing. So at our next meeting, I will do a little report back on that. I'll be serving on a panel this tomorrow afternoon with other folks from around the state, but in particular from around the Bakersfield and Delano areas. So I'm very excited about that. And on a more personal note, one of the reasons I'm extremely thrilled about it is because Dolores Huerta is going to be on the panel, co-founder of the United Farm Workers, founder of the Dolores Huerta Foundation, who lives in the area. And so I'm excited to get to see her. Throughout my entire career and work as an activist and organizer, like Dolores has been at like several points throughout my throughout that journey. And so I'm excited to get to share space with her, and so honored to be on a panel with her tomorrow. I'll give a more detailed report about that and the work of the Racial Equity Commission at our next commission meeting. Let's go ahead and move on to the subcommittee on data and research. Commissioner Sinar.
Thank you. So this will be brief because we've flagged most of the research projects in earlier meetings. The two that I just wanted to quickly highlight are both projects that are being conducted by the UCLA Institute for the Study of Hate. Deputy Director Watts mentioned one of those projects, which is reflected in the report, which is a literature review of what can be done at the level of schools to decrease hate and prejudice among students. So that review was done by a PhD student, Sarah Wilf. There's another one that we are just kind of in the beginning stages of by another PhD student at UCLA, also affiliated with the Institute for the Study of Hate. Their name is Dylan Trujillo, and that project will assess mental health needs of hate crime victims, the barriers to satisfying those needs or meeting the needs of people who have been affected, and interventions and policy recommendations. So that's, I think, just the two small items that I wanted to flag, but we are really appreciative of the staff, as always, and of our researchers, including these amazing students who are producing some excellent work for us.
You're on mute, Troy Robal.
Thank you for that reminder, Commissioner Quare. You would think by now I would know when I am not on mute. So thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Sinar. Let's move on to the subcommittee on policy recommendations and best practices in other jurisdictions. Back to you, Commissioner Quare.
Good afternoon or good morning, everybody. Thank you so much. So my update will be brief as well. It's kind of a reiteration of what we have been already working on. So we continue to work with Halima on understanding the resources the CBOs provide to the victims of hate. We have heard from CDSS that they are conducting an impact evaluation of their grant program. And so we plan to have conversations with them about how we can support their efforts. And I know that at the last at the last commission meeting, Commissioner Che had requested that some of the committees that were interested in engaging with experts discuss a plan. So we're hoping that some of those subcommittees were able to have those discussions, and if so, if there was any updates on that.
Commissioner Sinar.
Yeah, I can just speak for a minute about the Data and Research Subcommittee. So we did have a conversation about experts and how to utilize them. I think we want to continue to think about it as well. I think for our own committee, subcommittee, we're in contact with at least academic experts in the course of figuring out who to fund for new research projects. So at one level, we have fairly regular contact with experts. But on the other hand, I think your invitation for us to think more about this is always, it's an opportunity to think about who else we might be reaching out to. And I think the question was also in what capacity we might benefit from the consultation with additional experts. And I think for ourselves, it would likely be in, perhaps choosing a small number of subject matter experts to make it something that's manageable for us and not to put any additional burden on our overworked commission staff, and to meet with them, perhaps on a quarterly basis, certainly as needed. But I think in our view, it's both that we already have contact with experts, but creating some sort of formal relationship can sometimes make people feel that much more sort of invested in the commission. So there may be value in kind of assigning that more formal role to people. So that's kind of where we've gotten so far. I think we want to think further about who would be appropriate and how exactly we'd want to integrate them.
Thank you, Commissioner Sinar. Commissioner
Yes,
Claire,
thank
anything
you.
else from your
No,
subcommittee?
thank you very much. I think that's very helpful for our committee. So I will definitely take this back to Commissioner Che and we'll have a discussion. Was there any other committees that were able to have a discussion on it? Commissioner Levin?
And I concur with Commissioner Sinar. One just clarification that was brought up was particularly if there's an area where either on the commission itself or within the subcommittee, there was some kind of substantive gap, whatever that might be. We discussed that. The other thing that I think is a little different when it comes to research and data is that we might want to consider, after we have some California representation, if again there's a gap or there's someone who can bring in a value added that we wouldn't have, that we probably should be more open than, for instance, a subcommittee on community fora, right? So there's some templates that will work intra subcommittee and others that might be more broadly applicable. But if I may, because research and data in some ways almost takes care of itself, not as far as the research and data, but
Working with experts.
The pool of people who
Right.
who are doing that specific thing. And the one thing that I thought we might have an opportunity for, and I don't know what subcommittee it might be, would be in two areas. Again, one would be with those who bring in expertise that were involved in getting this commission through the legislature and really inform the legislature of why we're in need. I'm not saying everybody, and it's not I'm only Ruth. One of 9, but that's an inside joke because she was a relative by marriage. But in any event, and she was as sweet as you'd think she'd be. The other thing too, though, that I think we can bring in here, and it might be more symbolic, but I thought we had an opportunity for instance, with respect to interfaith or intercultural. And I don't know how to make that formula. That's why I say in some ways it's easier. Who knows about bias incidents? Who knows about this? Who knows about that? But depending on the forum, what I would encourage, if there is an area of the community that is not represented, number one, but also if there's an area with regard to subject matter expertise. I am always looking, for instance, like, well, we have someone on public health on the commission, but if we didn't, that would be the kind of individual that I'd look for. So where there's gaps, both with regard to substance, but also with regard to representation, as we see there's the disabled community isn't represented. The undocumented community isn't represented, and maybe it can be done through a scholar or through someone who's got some professional experience. But that's something that again, I hope we would look at. And I just want to again thank you for, it can't be done by one person, and even it can't be done by a whole subcommittee. It can't be done by a whole commission, but we don't get the opportunity to really get to know each other like I did with the folks that we got this commission started. So there are fewer opportunities for true gratitude. So Commissioner Cuellar, from South to Sacramento area and beyond, thank you so much, because I know how hard work you put into this, and I don't get enough opportunities to thank you in person. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, Commissioner Levin. And I think all your points are very well taken. There are definitely gaps, and I will definitely take this back to Commissioner Che. And I know in my other subcommittee, Commissioner Filer, we did speak about it briefly. And I believe we kind of feel that in our committee that we do a good job at talking to the subject matter experts, especially when we do our community forums. So I just wanted to kind of, and is that okay to say that, Commissioner Filer? Okay, just wanted to make sure. Again, thank you for all of this. And if any other committees have any other suggestions or anything, please don't hesitate to let us know. But we will be, I will be bringing this back to Commissioner Che.
Thank you, Commissioner Cuellar. The only thing I would add around that's in this area around the subcommittee on policy recommendations and best practices in other jurisdictions is that we have had requests through public comment and others to take positions on legislation. We have continued to say we are not prepared yet to do that. It doesn't mean that we will not do that in the future, but for now that the recommendation from the committee is that we continue to have that we're not doing that until, but that could be something further down the road. So just an FYI on it. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
So much, Commissioner Cuellar. Let's move on to the subcommittee on recommendations for law enforcement. Commissioner Damsky.
Thank you, Sheriff. So unlike our previous two committees, I have a pretty long report today. As you know, the Committee on Making Recommendations to Law Enforcement has been working with POST since June of last year. That's California Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, to discuss producing a video to cover new requirements for reporting hate crimes and hate incidents as stipulated in Assembly Bill 449, which went into effect in January of this year. Through our meetings with POST over these months and input received from our commissioners about what the video should include, we developed a working draft, which we presented at our full commission meeting at our last full commission meeting in February. And I brought the feedback received from that meeting to the POST meeting. These questions and concerns included avoiding using language in the video such as quote unquote rising to the level of hate crimes, treating hate crimes and incidents seriously, the importance of having dedicated officers who are multilingual, making sure officers know about California versus hate and other options for reporting hate, gathering evidence in ways that ensure trust through developing relationships with community organization partnerships, a question about how POST will evaluate the effectiveness of the video in reporting hate crimes and incidents in the field, And the other question we did have, which I have an answer to, will the video be made public? The answer to that is no. Post videos are available only to law enforcement agencies in the post program and post learning portal agency subscribers. The meeting with Post was held Wednesday through Friday, February 28th through March 1st. California Civil Rights Deputy Director Becky Monroe was able to attend all 3 days. I was present Thursday and Friday, and Commissioner Suthers was unable to attend. We had other agencies represented and law enforcement officials as well. These were Police Chief Jamie Knox, representing the city of Walnut Creek, highlighting his own experience as an openly gay police chief. Detective Level 3 Orlando Martinez, hate crime coordinator for LAPD and the Robbery Homicide Division. Myself, Becky Monroe, Cynthia Deedle, Director of General Counsel for Meta and also does law enforcement training. Huang Nguyen of the AAPI Equity Alliance. Greg DeGier, Civil Rights Advocate of the ARC, California. Brandon Brooks, representing California Black Media. Ariella Lowenstein, Deputy Regional Director for ADL Los Angeles. Emily Romero of Churla Outreach and Education Program Coordinator. And Zach Marquith, Deputy Director of Islamic Network Group, ING. We also had 4 members of Post staff and videographers from Digital Outpost who were working together during that week. Post video team has a very specific process for the way they do their work. Much of this was not apparent to us until we were on location meeting with them, and some of it was not even clear to us until the last day of our meeting. For instance, they used the first day of their meeting for bonding the group of subject matter experts and setting agreements on the parameters which will guide the production of the video. They require that all participants attend all 3 days of the session, and they made an allowance for me to join on day 2 with the understanding that any decisions made on day 1 would not be open for reconsideration on days 2 or 3. They also will not integrate any additional participants or subject matter experts who are not present for this initial session into the next session for filming the video. And this means that Commissioner Suthers will be unable to participate in that session at the end of April, early May. Additionally, we learned that contrary to our previous understanding, there is no mechanism for this commission to provide feedback on the work of the post meeting and process before or after filming the video. This was shocking, completely disappointing, and greatly concerning. And when I raised a question about why this was so during the post meeting, I was told that if they were to allow all of those subject matter experts who are participating to bring the work product back to their agencies for feedback and then come back to another meeting later, that the video would actually never get done. That it was just too unwieldy to manage that kind of a process. So they really have stringent restrictions on how they do their process and who can provide input. They also would not allow me to share the outlines and drafts that we had created during the meeting. I was only allowed to present the summary. So when I had joined the group on Thursday, the group had already, quote unquote, bonded and determined that the following topics should be included in the video, much in agreement with things we discussed amongst ourselves. What is AB 449? What is the supplemental form that needs to be filled out, and where is that located? The necessity of providing the hate crimes brochure to victims, and that it's essential to provide resources for promoting healing and assuredness, and to promote California versus hate. To include what are hate crimes and hate incidents, and why are we reporting hate incidents? And there were 2 notes about this. One was that it should be noted that AB 449 only requires reporting of hate crimes and incidents where there is already a crime that has been reported. Hate incidents on their own have no legal definition or basis for prosecution at this time. However, it was also noted that investigating hate crimes and incidents is important not only to expose them and bring awareness to their occurrence, but also to better understand the scope of the problem. It was emphasized that the video must be geared towards officers and investigations, with the understanding that hate crime charges can result in more appropriate results, such as justice, rehabilitation, and victim recovery. One of the objectives is to orient officers to a victim-centered approach. Other discussion points included requiring empathy from the officers, the fact that victimization is often related to assumptions that individuals belong to a protected identity community, and conversely, when an individual from that community is targeted, that whole community is targeted. The victims won't likely know if a hate event is a crime or an incident. Therefore, what should be emphasized is the hate that was experienced, not the status of the event as a crime or an incident. Recognize that officers themselves are often members of those protected communities as well. An important highlight, proper reporting of hate crimes and incidents can save lives. Officers are often stereotyped as bad apples, and Muslims are often stereotyped as terrorists, and this was pointed out to impress that our experiences may be similar to each other's in many ways that may be unexpected, but we may have some commonalities that are not obvious to each other. Emphasizing action steps in the video is important, such as completing the supplemental report, first responder checklist for every hate crime, and providing the California versus Hate brochure, pointing out that every law enforcement agency is required to adopt a hate crimes policy, and every officer must know it and follow it. Portrayal of victims and scenarios in the videos need to be realistic and not perpetuating stereotyped images. Portray officers and victims alike as individuals, not as a collective generalization, and as valued community members. It was also pointed out that not all hate crimes are violent. Examples include leafleting, swatting, vandalism, and graffiti. One glaring statistic shared with us, 80% of hate incidents reported over the last 3 years are not prosecutable as hate crimes. Many were reported with an inadequate response from law enforcement, or law enforcement didn't collect data, or there were language barriers which interfered with data collection, and in many cases, non-English speakers opted not to report at all. We discussed that California versus Hate is modeled after LA versus Hate, and both hold to support the victim, even if no laws are broken. So that's an underlying value of these programs, which is separate from the video, and we will hope that the video will somehow express. We decided we want to include some initial things that an officer can say when someone reports a hate crime or incident, and that the focus on who the video is for is police officers, supervisors, patrol staff, and dispatchers. We want to have real victims telling their stories as much as possible, emphasizing what officers did well and what they could do better. From our representatives of law enforcement, they said that it's important to make reporting hate crimes more memorable to the officers, so they will do it. Ways to do that include featuring families of victims whose reports were not taken seriously, what it means to them, and why reporting matters. And phrasing is critical. It needs to be said in a way that will matter to the officers. We were talking about using real scenarios, such as the prosecution of Dylan Roof, who shot people at the Mother Emanuel Church, talking about how law enforcement built the case to give the prosecutor the evidence they needed to convict. And as a way of kind of setting a groundwork for law enforcement officers to have the motivation to do this investigative work when a hate incident or crime is reported. And then to follow up with the victims after providing the brochure and resources to them. Then there were some essential thoughts which narrowed our focus for the rest of our discussion towards creating an outline for the video. One was differentiating between the shalls, meaning what is mandatory in AB 449, and the shoulds, which are not mandatory but would be best practices. An example given was that domestic violence had not been included in the law as a hate crime, but this changed in the 1990s so that incident data can be used to later report a hate crime. It was emphasized again that there is no definition yet of hate incidents in the penal code, yet law enforcement's job is to respond to all of it. There's a need to clarify that the supplemental report needs to be filed when there is an element of bias, because that is how the statute is written. If no crime has occurred, many precincts will not report incidents, but it would be best practice if they did until there is a statutory requirement. The supplemental report is a tool which will help track hate crimes and incidents. Currently, it is a paper and pen form, which will at some point be computerized so that when the bias box is checked on the form, report, the supplemental form will automatically pop up. There was a discussion that there are 2 different portals for reporting by different agencies, Cybers in California and NIBRS for federal agencies. There were questions about whether the data between the 2 different portals will be integrated or synthesized. We didn't have an answer for that question. They're on different, the 2 agencies are in different schedules for going from pen and paper to digital. Some agencies have to pay for this, and budgeting may be an issue causing delays. So even though this is not likely to be part of the video, these were questions that were raised during our discussion that I found concerning. Currently, there are no penalties for failing to report hate events. I found that interesting. There was no discussion if there ever will be such penalties for law enforcement failing to report, but it was emphasized that reporting should be immediate. A little more detail about the AB 449 statute uses bias as the terminology for defining hate crimes and incidents. Therefore, bias motivation language needs to be included in the video. Also, bias may not be hate, but can be a motivating factor. Example given was that someone who says they have lots of Jewish friends and then they spout anti-Semitic conspiracy theories with no malice intended. More of a matter of ignorance. It was noted that there's a bill this year, AB 2604, which would add discriminatory selection language to the statute in addition to the bias language. There was mention of Ralph Act violations and how sometimes people Zoom bombing city council meetings may have the misperception that the First Amendment right of free speech allows citizens to say intimidating things and make threats. These are not okay. I don't know if that will be in the video. It was just kind of an aside that was mentioned. It was also discussed that until the state budget is finalized, as we discussed in our last full commission meeting, there are parts of AB 449 that are not yet fully funded. In order for the video to be accurate, it might need to be limited to those parts of the bill which are funded at the time the video is completed, with a plan to cover the other aspects in a subsequent video at a later date. From here, we discussed testimonials to include in the video. We settled on a series of 3 vignettes to track through the video. One would be that the victim did not report the crime or incident. They were too afraid to report for any of a variety of reasons. The second vignette would be that the victim reported the crime or incident to law enforcement and received a response that was inadequate or unhelpful. And the third was that the victim would report the crime or incident, law enforcement response was helpful to the victim, and full adjudication of the crime. We created a list of potential victim stories to include, and each of us participants were left with the assignment to reach out to people we know who may fit one of these descriptions. We have an outreach script for sending email invitations for consideration to invite people to be considered in the videos, and we'll schedule preliminary Zoom meetings with the film production crew for casting choices. The list includes, but is not limited to, harassment of a woman working in a non-traditional field. Someone mentioned a father in Houston who was murdered. I'm not quite sure what the hate crime aspect was of that particular incident. The mother of Heather Heyer, who was murdered in the Charlottesville riots. The targeting of Jews in the Pico Robertson area of Los Angeles. The Poway Synagogue shooting in San Diego. A shooting in a San Francisco synagogue. The lynching of a gay Black Native American man in Costa Contra Costa County some years ago. The local LGBTQ community is trying now to get this reopened as a hate crime. Massacre of Latinos in Salinas, attacks on Asian elders in San Francisco, Asian hate incidents at restaurants and other places, and then story of a trans Latina person that that a couple of people mentioned. It was asked of our law enforcement officials, representatives, what kinds of hate crimes and incidents are most commonly reported? And there are a few. Oops, just lost my, there we go. Most commonly reported crimes include simple assaults, vandalisms, and criminal threats and intimidation. The most common victims of reported hate crimes and incidents are Black men and gay Black men. I'm sorry, gay men. So we were looking at this question as perhaps how we might focus our pool of victims. And when we started talking about victims, it actually, we didn't include any victims who were Black, but we did include a gay male aspect. So here are some examples. Scenario one, where somebody would be too afraid to report a hate incident or crime. An example might be someone who is undocumented, and therefore they're afraid to reveal themselves to law enforcement. Someone who may have a language barrier and is afraid of being misunderstood. Someone who may be gay and closeted and doesn't want to be outed in the process of filing a report. Here we also talked about women working in non-traditional fields who don't have the backing of their unions to uphold their safety. Becky mentioned she has some connections at the Los Angeles LGBTQ Center. And then we talked about perhaps domestic workers and asylum seekers might fit in this category. And an example of a scenario would be somebody was hit outside of a gay bar. He didn't report it because he's not out to his family, and he didn't feel safe, so he had to change jobs. Scenario two, where a report was made, but police response was not adequate, would be an example. Somebody mentioned an example of a neighbor, somebody he knew who had a neighbor who yelled at him regularly, and this escalated over time into violence. So, so that's a possible story. One of them is, another possibility is immigrants and laborers who are intimidated with people driving cars trying to run them over. They may not report, or the report may be difficult because of language barriers. We talked about small business immigrants who someone from our Churla group referenced. And then there was the one of an Asian American female who was verbally attacked in a restaurant. The idea is that law enforcement told them there was nothing they could do, or that they are still scared of their neighbor or going back to the restaurant. So that's why this particular scenario shows the inadequacy of the response from law enforcement. The third scenario, where there was a report made and law enforcement response was great, included some attacks on Asian Americans, a particularly mentioned attack at a Turkish restaurant, an attack on a disabled or an elder and disabled person from Sacramento, and religious intimidation and vandalism. In this idea, the initial response was respectful. The victim was made to feel that they were in a safe place. The officer followed up with them and helped them through it, and there was a good legal resolution. So that's like the basic framework for the video that that we were left thinking about at the end of our third day. The filming schedule is April 30th to May 2nd, but we are not all required to be there for each of these days. The first day will be a half a day of preparation at the same hotel we met at in Carlsbad. Each of the other days will involve filming at various locations to be determined, featuring one or two of the victims that will be filming. Any one of the subject matter experts who is bringing a victim for filming is asked to be there on those filming days to support them emotionally. Post described the video as being somewhere between 5 and 15 minutes. And I have to say, I was very surprised to hear them say as little as 5 minutes. They showed us a number of videos that they have done, some were as short as 2 minutes. And these demonstrated different ways of sharing information through imagery and scenarios, eliminating the need for lengthy scripts. In other words, they showed the information rather than reading it. So it was not so much like a lecture. Post makes the use of a narrator in between scenes to highlight important points. And I found the videos produced in an effective, interesting, and purposeful way, even though it was very different from what our committee was expecting from the process from our meetings with Post. One question that arose is whether I, as a commissioner, can be included in the video as a subject matter expert on behalf of the commission. This is something our committee had not even yet had a chance to talk about. So everyone here is hearing that question for the first time. Our Committee on Recommendations to Law Enforcement had a follow-up meeting on March 7th, where we discussed the following. And some of this was mentioned earlier today, that California versus Hate is not permanently funded. It is currently funded for 3 years. So this raised the question for us about how, should this funding go away, how will this impact the sharing of the brochure about California versus Hate that we are recommending in the video. Our committee's position is that our feedback, both from our committee and from the entire commission, by and large was not incorporated in the meetings that led up to the production of the final product of this first session. While there weren't any red flags that came up for us, we're disappointed. We expected to be able to have more of a back and forth with them and the full commission, and that is clearly not the way they work. We want to ask Post whether our commission is going to be mentioned as part of the production of the video in the credits, and if not, what need is there for us to continue to work with Post? The question was, since this video is a real departure from what we were envisioning, do we want to continue to work with them? Commissioner Suthers raised the idea of a plan B, which is to look at partnering with the Shoah Foundation, the School of Cinematic Arts, and the Simon Wiesenthal Center to produce a second video to encourage reporting in communities of concern. While the Post video is designed for law enforcement professionals, the Plan B video would be designed for these communities. We discussed doing a poll to see whether a project like this would be supported, if available, and if so, is this something that the California versus Hate marketing team might handle? So that concludes my lengthy report. I was going to ask Commissioner Suthers if he had anything to add, but he is not back with us yet. I welcome your questions. I'm sure they're going to be a lot.
Commissioner Suthers is back, Commissioner Damsky.
Oh, welcome back, Commissioner Suthers. Do you have anything you want to add?
No, I just want to say first, Commissioner Damsky, excellent presentation. And thank you for being there. My apologies to the entire commission. As you know, I probably had the two most important days of this year happen on those 2 days when the chief of police was leaving and the new chief of police was being sworn in, and I'm the president of that commission and I had to be there. And although LAPD offered to fly me down there in the helicopter, I didn't want to be the subject of an ethics investigation, so I declined. So anyway, I just want to say that Commissioner Damsky represented us. As someone who's had a relationship with Post for over 40 years, I was deeply disappointed with their inflexibility as it related to our input, and some other things that they weren't willing to consider. So that is the reason I came up with a plan B, particularly since I thought perhaps we could have a more broad-based outreach effort to the community at large instead of just law enforcement. Even though our subcommittee is recommendations for law enforcement, we certainly wouldn't put together a video that law enforcement couldn't use to distribute to their communities. And so that's why I came up with that. But what really disturbed me, and you all are family, so I'm just going to say it, the notion that we might not even be mentioned in this production was really, to me, disappointing. And so that's why I thought maybe we should go ahead and see what they're going to do. If they're willing to identify us, that's great. But if they're not, perhaps we should do something more tailored to our needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Suthers and Commissioner Damsky. Are there questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Sinar and then Commissioner Cuellar.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was a lot of information, and I appreciate your making the effort to share it in detail, particularly because the post rules around not providing anything for the commission as a whole. This was helpful to hear the list. I was a little confused about just particular points in the account that you gave. So I just wanted to clarify a few things. Just first, I think toward the end of your comments, Commissioner Damsky, you talked about which vignettes or victims would be presented. And so there were a couple of things related to that I had questions about. I mean, first, you mentioned something about victims being present or brought in, and I wasn't sure, are they intending to film actual victims describing their incidents?
Yes, they are.
Okay, and I just wonder about that choice. It seems honestly a little bit odd to me that you would ask people to relive their experiences for a police training video. And just thinking about like the secondary trauma aspects of that, why wouldn't you have actors recreate scenarios? And particularly if they're trying to get the details of particular incidents, like you mentioned one that happened at a Turkish restaurant. I mean, I would hope that the ethnicity of a particular restaurant isn't brought into the description of a scenario. It just seems unnecessary. So I guess the first point is, why use victims to relive their trauma for a training video for police? Second, I just want to make sure that there are no kind of unnecessary specification of the ethnicities of places where incidents happened. It seems not particularly relevant and seems like it could be, just gratuitous. And then third, on that point about vignettes and victims, I was curious, you mentioned that there wouldn't be any example involving a Black person, and that seemed, I was just wondering why that choice, given that African Americans are usually subject to the greatest volume of hate crimes, I think both in California and nationally. So that was one set of questions, has to do with the victims and vignettes. And, I understand that this is a process in which it seems like the commission input has been marginal to begin with, or not marginal all along, but during this particular meeting was marginal. So I'm, not implying that any of these were the decisions that we have made as a commission or a subcommittee, but I just wanted to get some understanding of those sets of questions. And then also, I think you had mentioned kind of in your recounting of points made by different people, there was just a comment about something like, and I'm paraphrasing, and I think I may not have even heard it correctly, but that just like not all Muslims are terrorists, not all police are bad actors. And I was just kind of taken a little bit aback by what seemed to be an unnecessary invocation of a stereotype of one group to make a point about police. So I just wanted to just put that out there, that I understand the point, and I think the intent is to say that stereotypes, should not have purchase, but it just seems to me that, first of all, I hope that that is a point that was just, that no one is intending to address in the video in the way that it was recounted, but just to make sure that we're not clarifying stereotypes by invoking other ones.
That's a really good point, Commissioner Sinar. The reason we were talking about using victims in the videos, actually Post was talking about using victims in the videos, was because they have experience in doing that. The victim they prefer for the victim to tell their story if they're at a point where they're comfortable to do that. If they're not comfortable to do that, they will look to see if it's a story that can be acted, but they find that actors generally don't do a good job of talking about why they didn't report and what the outcome was of reporting or not reporting. So the emphasis is not so much on the incident, but on the experience with law enforcement. So the the victims, for lack of a better word, would not be required to recount the details of what happened to them in great detail. I mentioned that there were no Black men chosen or mentioned as we were talking about potential victims, because it was something that was emphasized by Detective Orlando as one of the highest groups experiencing hate crimes. I found it a disconnect that we didn't have anybody mention a particular individual from that community. I'm sure that there would be many. So I can refer that feedback back to the post video team and let them know that came up. Some of the categories were broad enough that it may be that we have a person who has multiple minority identities as a victim. So there may be some overlap there to include that. And I missed your third question. What was that?
Well, the third question on the vignettes and the victims was whether there was a reference to an incident happening at a Turkish restaurant, and I was just curious as to whether the ethnicity of the restaurant was going to be mentioned, because it seems unnecessary.
Okay. Thank you.
Alec, did you, Deputy Director Watts?
Sure. Sorry, just one quick comment to sort of guide the discussion. And I think we're going in the right direction, but I do just want to flag that if there are any red flags on the part of this commission, we can bring this back to post and we can see how we can kind of incorporate those red flags, including things such as what Commissioner Senard has raised, but also things that seem to be missing. So if there are big gaps in what we're doing, feel free to raise those and we will do our best to incorporate that. So even though a lot of the content seems to be, or we've been told it's somewhat set, if there's significant things that we think need to be modified, then we can do our best to get that incorporated before the production of the video.
I also just want to point out, we cannot take any official action as a commission because we've not noticed that. So this is a report out, so just an FYI on that. Commissioner Cuellar.
Yes, thank you. My question is, Commissioner Damsky, when have they discussed when they're on reservations, and how do they report, or do they rely on the tribal and tribal law enforcement to do the reporting? So that's a question I have.
We had absolutely no discussion about what happens in tribal law enforcement. I'm sorry to say. And we also didn't have anybody representing any of the tribal communities.
I was going to ask that as well. Was there any other, well, no, I guess that nobody was there from any tribal official was there, correct?
Not unless they had another identity and I wasn't aware that they were tribal.
Okay, all right. Thank you. That was just my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cuellar. Commissioner Levin?
Yeah, yes, thank you. As my fellow commissioners have pointed out, African Americans are the most frequent target nationally. They're the most frequent target in California, and in my research, for instance, Los Angeles, most frequent target as well. So it's highly unusual that the other thing too that I just want to point out, just one of the things is, like, being at the ball stadium a lot over the years, these videos are not mandatory, and how do I say this, it's not like that's the only place where we can reach law enforcement or communities. There's nothing to stop any other entity. By the way, I don't want all my friends in the Civil Rights Department to put out a warrant for me, because they have enough work. And again, I just want to reiterate, Alec, wow, thank you. So you produced an Encyclopedia Britannica in record time, like getting those vaccines out and things like that. It really took an effort. So what I'm saying to you is, post what I've always been impressed with them is they get together some of the best people and then ignore them. So, I'm serious. So, there's nothing to stop this commission from either outreach with other places or even, again, we have a law enforcement subcommittee. If we wanted to, there could, I don't want to volunteer anybody, but in other words, a short video, that's something that I think we have either the talent or access to it, and we can just put it on YouTube. So what I'm saying is I don't want people on the commission to, if they feel that we're being short shrifted, that we're giving up some incredible opportunity to go on America's Got Talent or something, because these videos, and what people tell you on the inside is they're produced, but there's no requirement that they be used. And the number of people that I think or number of sworn law enforcement that would actually view it as opposed to have access to it would be very small. And there's nothing precluding either various subcommittees from assisting and saying, hey, we've got a subject matter expert here. We've got a commissioner that could do this video. I don't want to point anybody out because I understand that he's overwhelmed with work. But in any event, I just wanted to point out, statistically, these videos are not mandatory. They're not as widely viewed as you would think. And I'm a little bit disappointed that another agency would kind of like cast a little shade on this commission. But, like Taylor says, anyway, if there are alternatives. So I appreciate the plan B. The only thing on the plan B is I don't know anything about it. And one of the things that I think this commission is lucky about is we have folks scrambling to either have us concentrate in a particular area for research or on outreach and this and that. So I think the only thing I would ask, if we're going to do any public facing productions, is to have a more thorough way of looking at what's going to be covered, who's going to be doing it, how is it going to be distributed, and what target audiences we can include. We can very well include law enforcement, in a series of videos. I don't know, but I also know that there are a variety of human relations commissions and universities that also either I don't want to say in lieu of USC, but it may be an assistance. In other words, there are multiple opportunities that may actually be better at public facing outreach than this, particularly if I'm sorry, if my fellow commissioners are not being considered in the manner that their expertise requires. We're an independent entity, and I just want folks to consider that, because when I say that I am big fans of this ball team, it's really true. And I think the only thing that's stopping us is we're limited with regard to our ability to coordinate and time. But I would like to look into Commissioner Souther's suggestion. I have found throughout my professional career that ignoring Commissioner Souther's suggestions usually come back to haunt me in a negative way, because he is very much a very precious character and a dear friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Levin. So to wrap this part up, my observations would be that for the subcommittee to continue to think about, to provide this feedback to post if they're willing to hear it, and to get some of the answers to those questions that you raised, Commissioner Damski. And then the other thing I would say is that, part of the remedy of this is we are charged with making policy recommendations to state agencies and the legislature. So if through this experience you feel like Post needs some counsel on how to maybe change their own policy around how some of these pieces are created and distributed, then maybe that's something that we include in our report or a future report as a way to channel this. I am very sorry to hear that both of you are very disappointed with your experience. That I think is not the direction that I feel like both of you expected it to head in from your previous reports.
Yeah.
So, but it gives us information that I think that we can use in our own work, and that there is work to do with our fellow agencies at in the state. So thank you for that very thorough recounting and for listening to the feedback of the other commissioners, and hopefully we will make some progress. But yeah, so thank you for that. And I'm sorry that I apologize for your disappointment, because I can see it on your faces, and I know it's probably very frustrating considering all the hours that you have both put in to try to get to this place. So
Thank you, Chair.
we have, oh, Bambi, Vice Chair Salcedo, did you have a comment before we move on?
I do. Just really quick, I wanted once again appreciate all the work that has happened, and thank you so much for the comprehensive report, Commissioner Adamski and Commissioner Saunders. Just thinking about all of this, right? In my specific work that I've done, trying to amend relations and training and all of that with law enforcement, right? And just, I guess a reminder again, right, of how we need to transform the culture of law enforcement, right? And so I don't know, maybe we should think mandates, right, that need to be put in place, right? Perhaps laws and legislation, right, that will have to force law enforcement to comply what needs to happen, right? Like we need to shift the culture that has been built for many, many years that has sort of like create this thought of, everybody else is the enemy, right? Like using this militaristic mentality, I guess, right? And what we're trying to do and where it needs to happen, right, is for us to be able to work collectively. And when somebody is resistant to that, then it not only makes it harder, but almost impossible to really shift the hate that is generated against our communities. So I just wanted to encourage us for us to continue to push in whatever way possible, and obviously be innovative as we continue to think what we're going to propose and how we're going to make this happen. But again, thank you so much for all the work that has happened.
Thank you, Commissioner Salcedo, Vice Chair Salcedo. Commissioner Sonar.
Just a small point about POST, and this is going back to a report that I had noted in our last meeting on the Little Hoover Commission report on police trainings. One of the things that they pointed out was that POST does not have much representation from community members, that in terms of its board itself, it does not have really robust representation from particularly impacted or vulnerable communities. So in some ways, it should not be surprising, unfortunate, but perhaps unsurprising that the orientation of this training experience was more closed and less inclusive than it ought to have been. But it's something I think for us to consider as we decide who to partner with. And I also feel like, as much as maybe we were disappointed in the commission not being acknowledged or recognized in the video, if it comes to the point where the video does not seem to reflect our work, I think as maybe Commissioner Damansky said earlier, it may be a point at which we decide whether we want to be affiliated with this video or whether it's better that something that is not reflective of our values or priorities, or if there are concerning elements to it, that it's better not to be associated with a product that we don't think is actually serving our needs.
Thank you, Commissioner Snar. Commissioner Damsky?
Thank you. I want to respond to some of the last comments that were made. I appreciate everybody's feedback. Thank you for sharing my disappointment with me and with Commissioner Suthers. What you were saying, Commissioner Sinar, is absolutely right. These were law enforcement officials, high-level law enforcement officials, who were creating a video for law enforcement individuals. So it was not like they were in our world. It was like we were marginally in theirs. So that was very much the perspective. It kept being emphasized that law enforcement officers will not do anything unless they absolutely have to do it. So it needs to be codified in law. And that's why the emphasis of the video was, this is what you have to do, and this is what happens if you don't do it. This is what happens if you sort of do it. This is what happens if you do it well. And lastly, I forget my last point. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for your input. I see Commissioner Salcedo asked if we could share some examples of the videos. I do have links to 2 videos that were sent to us by post. I'm going to see if I can find them before this meeting is over and pop them in the chat. They are not the newer ones that I think are really well done. Oh, I remember my other point. Post told us, and maybe the experience of some folks who have actually worked more with Post than I have, they told us that a video like this would be required for every officer to view and to be checked off that they have seen it at the, what do they call those introductory meetings in the morning, Commissioner Suthers? Roll call, yes, at the roll call meeting before they go out into the field. So I'm guessing that is the best practices, or the best hope that that's how it goes that way. I was led by the Post presenters to think that that was more of a requirement than some folks here seem to think it really happens. So with that, I'll conclude this. Oh, thank you for Alec for putting those videos in the chat.
Thank you, Commissioner Damsky. As we move on to the subcommittee on community forums, because we have a community forum coming up today, I also just want to emphasize a point Commissioner Sinar made. One of the questions that I think I will get tomorrow at the Racial Equity Commission meeting is around our recommendations around law enforcement. And one of the things I will talk about is the findings from the Little Hoover Commission around the efficacy of that training, and how there is almost no data that actually says that some of these things are improving in the field, because that is a conversation that the commission, the Racial Equity Commission, wants to have tomorrow. So thank you again, Commissioner Damsky and Commissioner Suthers. Let's move on to the subcommittee on community forums. We have a great community forum coming up today with some great presenters, Commissioners Cuellar and Filer.
Good morning again. I will be doing our update. I sit on this subcommittee with Commissioner Filer. So like Chair Roybal said, right after this meeting, we will be holding our first community forum for 2024, which we are super excited for. So hopefully we'll be able to see all of you there. Today's forum is titled Understanding Hate During Election Season. So I think this is a really good topic. We have some really great speakers. We have Secretary of State, Dr. Shirley Weber, who will be speaking. And we also have Jacqueline De Leon from NARF. She'll be also speaking. So again, hope to see everybody there.
Commissioner Cuellar, NARF is the Native American Rights
Fund. Yes, thank you. And then we are also currently working on our second community forum, and that has been, we have a date already, and that's May 11th. And it's at 1:30. It'll be held in Shingle Springs, which is a rural community in El Dorado County. And that forum is going to be really focused in the Native community, the hate that's experienced in our Native community. So again, I'm really hoping to see all of you there. And again, we are still working on our third and fourth one. Our third forum, we're looking at the months of August or September. So dates will be coming, probably the next commission meeting we'll have more dates and more the topics that we have discussed a couple topics, but we really, like I said, I want to make sure before I let all the commissioners know exactly the date and things like that. So but we are working on those. So again, looking forward to all of those, and hopefully all of you you will be able to attend. The next meeting, the next community forum is in person, correct? Yes, it is. Okay, and that's all I have for today. And if Commissioner Filer has anything to add.
Nope, that was just perfect. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you, Commissioner Cuellar. Thank you, Commissioner Filer, and thank you both. I know you're going to be facilitating today, I think, Commissioner Filer, the public comment, so and the process. So thank you. I look forward to our 2 o'clock rendezvous and to hear from Dr. Weber and the person from NARF. So thank you for putting that together. And I know I speak for the whole commission when I say we are excited to come to the Rancheria in El Dorado. And get to talk about that important topic. There is no report from the subcommittee on funding at this time. We'll go to public comment on this section. Monica, are there any requests for public comment?
No request for public comment.
I see no request for public comment. We'll move on to commission member announcements. I won't call on you individually. If you have an announcement, please raise your hand and I will recognize you. Vice Chair Salcedo.
Thank you so much, Chair. Just really quick, I am so grateful and happy to share with all of you that we are opening a satellite office in El Monte. And we're having our grand opening on March 30th, which is a Saturday. If you are around in LA and want to have delicious tacos, we're having a block party and performances. Gia Gunn is going to be our MC and host. So it's going to be super cool, super amazing. Come through if you're here in LA, in particular in El Monte. So we'll see you there. It's going to be from 12 to 4. So hope to see you there.
El Monte, órale, I'm from La Puente, so I am so excited.
Yes,
I might have to go.
You know, our community has been neglected for many years over
Yeah.
there, and so we want to make sure that we support our
I
community
am
in the best
excited.
possible way. So,
Vice
yes.
Chair Salcedo, I'm going to try and come to that. Like,
Okay. Hopefully
so
we get
yeah,
to see you.
that very exciting. Good in my where I grew up, my old stomping grounds.
Yes, hopefully we get to see you.
Commissioner Damsky.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to share with everyone that I have been asked to join the allyship committee of the Anti-Defamation League of San Diego and Imperial Counties. The allyship committee works to build bridges between various communities. So we haven't started that work yet, but that's a new piece I'll be doing starting soon.
Congratulations, Commissioner Damsky.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sinar.
Thank you. Yeah, I hadn't mentioned this previously, but I've been, since the topic of universities has come up, I've been a member of Stanford's Muslim, Arab, and Palestinian Communities Committee for the last several months, which was set up alongside a parallel anti-Semitism committee to look at concerns of community members on campus. And I thought I would just put in the chat the preliminary, a very interim sort of first cut of recommendations from our committee, which we put out about maybe 6 weeks ago. We'll also be producing a final report, but yeah, trying to address the concerns of folks and what can be done to alleviate the kinds of experiences that people are having on our college campus.
Thank you, Commissioner Sinar, and thank you for that work. Commissioner Levin.
And again, you know, unfortunately, Commissioner Che had to go, but since this is the personal time, I again just want to reiterate my congratulations to Stop AAPI Hate on their 4th anniversary this week. And I am so proud that the precursor to this commission gave them some of their initial spotlight. We had one of their founding members, a professor from San Francisco State, do a wonderful presentation, along with the gentleman that is next to me on the Zoom screen. So I just wanted to congratulate around that way. I also want to just really, there's so many people to thank here, but I'm going to just point one out, Commissioner Damsky. Darn, what efforts you're doing. And to make matters worse, they just came out with a report talking about cyber hacking on water departments. So it's not like this stuff just doesn't extend into everything that people are doing sometimes. Additionally, just wanted to update just because some folks have asked me a little bit about data. LA got the final figures. Now this is for victims. 841 for 2023. That is up 17% over the previous year. African Americans, as we were talking before, had the highest number of victimizations, 219, followed by Jews at 157, which was a record. We also saw, going back to what Commissioner Sinar said, not only increases in anti-Muslim, anti-Arab, which is on ethnicity, but we don't have time for that. Out of the top 10 cities, it was about a 16% increase. The final numbers, we got all of them. Only one decline out of the 10 largest U.S. cities. Philly was down, but that was down from a record the previous year. With regard to just briefly, San Francisco, after a decline the previous year, was up from 36 to 56, and San Diego, similarly, after a decline the previous year, went from 34 to 65. They are not records. Way back, for instance, when hate crimes were first starting to be tabulated, San Francisco went over 200. So LA is a record, but, and again, this is why we have 100-page things. You know why? Because they're accurate. And in the disclaimer part about the limitations on law enforcement data, please read it. It's very valuable. And one of the things we had in 92 during the LA civil disorders, we did not have a full accounting of hate crimes during that time. So if you want to say LA City hit a record, yes, in reported hate crimes, but we had 60 homicides, for instance, that did not show up back in 1992. So 2023 looked like a not good year. Incidentally, FBI just came out with their 2023 report. So as we're showing top 10 cities, and by the way, about 36 cities total, we're seeing about 35 cities, about 20% increase. So 2023 for hate crime, whether you look in a small number of large cities or a bigger number, we're looking at increases, certain records at a time when overall crime actually went down in 2023, according to the FBI. So thanks for the questions. Also, people who want me to speak, please contact me again. Had a little difficult patch here and just was trying to work on stuff for the commission. Happy to do it. Happy to go anywhere in the state on my dime if you have enough people to show up. Won't do it for 3 people unless the dessert's really good.
Thank you, Commissioner Levin. Commissioner Suthers.
Thank you, Chair Robol. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to remind everyone about it's a month from now, April 2021, is the LA Times Festival of Books. It is the largest book festival in the United States. We had 2 weeks ago about 250 authors. We now have 650 authors this year. And we're looking for, I would give you the list of stars, but it's too long. If you go to the link I put in the chat and just go to the one that tells you who the participants are going to be, you'll see it's incredible. I think you'll really be happy about being there, and it's just a good time for all, and hope you all will try to come out. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Suthers. Commissioner Filer.
Mine is a technology question. All the links that have been put in the chat, will I be able to, once I close out of this, be able to follow up on those links to look up all the information, or can we have those sent to us?
Deputy Director Watts, Monica, can you kind of harvest those and send them to the commissioners?
Sure, we can compile those for you.
Okay,
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Fowler, for that question. We'll move to public comment on items not on the agenda. So if there's any public comment for items that were not on the agenda, Monica, are there any requests for public comment?
No request for public comment.
All right, thank you for that. As always, if you have ideas for future agenda items, please email those to myself and Deputy Director Watts so that we can put them in the queue for consideration. I also want to remind everyone that we will be reconvening at 2 p.m. For our community forum on elections and hate. Thank you again to Commissioners Cuellar and Filer for putting that together. I'm very excited for it and to hear Dr. Weber. It's a treat to always hear our Secretary of State give remarks on elections and her own personal story around elections. So I'm very excited about that. And thank you all for your great conversation and brilliance today. And we will reconvene at 2 p.m. So I adjourn this meeting with the note that we will reconvene at 2 p.m. for the community forum on Wednesday, March 20th at 11:56 a.m. Great to see everyone and hopefully see you at the community forum. Thanks again.
thank you.
Thank you,
You all.
everyone.